Alright guys, welcome to a demo. Today we're going to talk about the isometric cityscape. So this one we're just going to get into how to start the basis for this project. And I know a lot of you are like, wow, Mr. Falk, this is really hard. Like, how are we going to do this? And what I want to do is just pace us through it. So we're not going to start with buildings. Today we're just going to start with building the floor. So putting pieces of grass and maybe roadways is going to be the first step that we'll take today. So here's an isometric image. That's just a reference. You do not have to create this image, but it's there for inspiration. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over here. We can see our grid is laid out in this beautiful big empty space. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the pen tool, and then we're just going to create some rectangles and squares and put them into this space, filling it all the way from side to side, isometric right to all the way to the end, the left all the way to the end. So fill the whole grid with ground. So again, pen tool, I'm going to use hotkey P to get my pen tool out here, and here we go. And I think what I'll probably do is I'm just going to start by filling in just like chunks of grass. And then I'll think about putting some roads in afterwards. So again, keep in mind, drawing along this isometric grid, you should end up kind of creating something that looks like a square that's in perspective. So I've got color there. It's going into black. I'm just going to go into like greens and browns, and I'll hit OK. Again, I'm just like freestyling, trying to figure out just like what would be the best layout for a park or a city. In my case, I'm going to go more towards greens and browns, so this is going to be like a country scene, maybe like a medieval town. So let's get back into it. Maybe I'll plan in some roads. These are going to be like little pathways for me. I'm just going to get a few different shapes to mess around with at first. Again, following my diagonal lines, and I'm closing my shapes. And you should notice that when the pen tool comes back on top of an anchor point that you started on, it'll create a 0, which means that it's completed the shape. Also check and see if like I'm actually getting my anchor points properly located, and you can see this little anchor point can be moved with my direct selection tool. Again, I'm using Alt and the wheel on my mouse to quickly scroll in, and zoom out. What's really neat about using or building these shapes first is that once you have something that you can use, you can click on it and then use your Alt copy function to duplicate that same shape. And so I'm going to maintain my little roads at 3 spaces wide. And I'm going to place this chunk of green in there. I'm going to use my direct select to bring those anchor points in. And I'll keep building this out. Holding Shift, I'll click on those 3 pieces of green. And to make it a little bit more interesting, like I could just copy it out and see if I can fill that space. But this time I'm going to go Object Transform and Reflect. And I'm reflecting it on the vertical axis. And you'll notice that this will still lock into the grid, only it's like turning the angle of these pieces of grass at like 90 degrees to the original pieces. So here's where I'm going to start to kind of play around with my placement. Maybe get some like off-centered roads. Maybe I can make a wider road in the middle here now. Get that locked right into that spot. Zoom in here. There we go. there's really no right or wrong answer to this. Like, I would just kind of play with the placement of these items until you actually fill out the entire screen. I'll pull this in here. I think I'll go all the way to the corner. All right. Maybe I'll pull this in just a little bit. Okay, and then the last move, I'm just going to take my pen tool and I'll describe this last little section here. Go right to the edge. Go straight to the corner. Close it up. And I'm noticing this should be 3 wide. And that's 3 wide. Move this one over just one. And this one's going to come this way. All right, cool. So if I turn my grids off with Control semicolon, we can kind of see like this basic layout. This can be like the beginning move for my little cityscape. Last thing I'll do is just move this anchor point and this anchor point. Again, a little microsurgery just to make sure everything's right in its right spot. And now what I'll do is I'm going to build my roads in the background, and I can do this pretty quickly. I don't have to go and cut all those shapes in there. I can just draw a rectangle over the entire space, and then if I give it this like tan color, I'll go into the browns, orangish brown kind of color. Turn my guides off. So where it is right now, we can see it completely. If I click on it and then right click, arrange, and send to back, or go object, arrange, and send to back, it'll throw that big shape behind all of these green plots of grass, and so we can actually see like where the roads are compared to where the grass is. I want to lighten this up just a little bit more, and maybe I'll change the colors of these little grass fields just so we have a little bit of variety within the composition. There we go. So this is going to be our first move for the day. It's just filling out the entire grid, your isometric grid, with plots of land and little roadways. And depending on if you're going to do actual like roads with yellow stripes, that can be another demo that we'll get into that I can show you individually at your desks. But this is where we want to go for right now, so that we can just get our land arranged in such a way that we can then start building buildings and putting trees and vehicles on top of it. Where this ends up eventually heading, let me see, I'm kind of scrolling through a bunch of windows here. Okay, is right here. So here's my example of my isometric cityscape. You can even see I got my Crossy Road chicken that's walking through my little cityscape. And I want you to see that you can actually like plan those chunks of grass and then start to build your buildings according to those chunks of grass and those little roadways. And it's kind of like laying the ground for then establishing your future designs. That's where we're going to stop for today. Again, continuing this culminating project on isometric projection. All right, take care, guys.